Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Build to Rent Network and our first in our new series, episode 1 in the Build for Rent podcast. Joining me today is our founder and CEO, chief executive leader of The Vision, Alvin Tavares, and he's going to be introducing us to the Build for Rent model. Alvin, how are you today?
Tim, I'm doing well. Glad to be here on the very first episode. It's a long journey to get to this point, but I'm finally proud to announce the Build for Rent developments and a lot of the developments that we have in this field.
I'm so excited for this because this has been kind of that long time coming, and you and I have worked together for a while now, and just excited to be a part of it. And I think for our listeners, I do think it's fair to ask you and kind of take a step back and walk us through your experience and what got you up to this point where you're ready to expand into the Build for Rent world.
Yeah, one of the things that I find most important is just listening. So if you talk to people, if you engage with people, a lot of times people will tell you things that represents what 20 other people are feeling. And so that's actually how I built my entire business. So, my background is that I was an investor first, and I got a real estate license just for my own investment deals. And then people kept asking for help. And so people asked for help. And so I listened to what the issues were, and I would help them do that. So I would start helping them find properties to buy. Then it got to the point where they didn't know who the contractors to use. Like, well, I'm using contractors. Here, I'll lend the people I'm working with to help you out. Then they would have to sell it. They need property management. And then little by little, you started building out a whole network of individuals that I would then pair with the investors to help them solve their challenge. And then just by doing a good job working with them, I created my first company, which was at that time Cape Coral Investor Network. Okay. And all we were doing was helping mostly out-of-state investors identify properties, rehab them, and either rent them out or they would sell them, right? And that was a whole business model. It was an extension of what I was already doing. Then we got to the point where we were doing a good amount of volume, grew the whole business out. And one of my investors was like, hey, what about new construction? And my entire background, all of my experience was on rehabs, but I'm not going to let a client that had bought multiple properties from me before go to somebody else. So I was like, all right, let's try this out. And then he bought one, he liked it, he did another one. And very quickly, we got to the stage where 80% of what we were doing was new construction. And we learned a lot along the way. And so some of the things that we've learned was that, new construction is a lot easier to identify. Finding a good property rehab takes a lot of work, a lot of boots in the ground, a lot of failed attempts, a lot of offers, a lot of backing out, a lot of renegotiating. And so we found that, hey, we can work with builders ahead of time, pre-negotiate, get a good package over for our investors. Now we can sell the same model 22, 30, 40 times, sometimes to the same investors. Right. So like I had an investor who had a mandate of buying 12 properties per year. Mm-hmm. Doing that rehab stuff, I could help him find maybe 4 or 5 in the year. So he was always short of his goal. Once we switched over to new construction, now we could just find one model in the area he likes and then just buy 12 all at the same time. So that forced us to now change the way we're doing business. So again, we're doing rehabs. The market told us that it made sense to now go to new construction. And we did a great job of listening and packaging deals together for our investors. And that 80% of our inventory now became new builds. And the 20% were the only headaches that we had. So that's when the rebrand came in, when we changed over to Build to Rent. And so I guess I'll answer your question by saying, Build to Rent is basically horizontal development, where we're seeing the trend move away from just having to be in a major city. And now we're seeing a lot of people want to be further out in the suburbs. They want to have a little bit more space. They want to have more control over their surroundings. And we're seeing more of a move towards being mobile, where people aren't necessarily looked to being tied to a 30-year fixed rate mortgage at the same rates or as previous generations. People like the idea of being in an area for a couple of years, enjoying and moving on. And so with this trend, we're able to see a lot of investors get better returns on buying new builds than buying older properties. And so we're now at the stage now where we blew this business out, and some of our investors are saying like, okay, this residential stuff, basically 1 through 4 units is cute. We've done a lot of business, but now we want bigger deals. And now we're seeing that a lot of these REITs, these family home offices, some of these larger buyers are saying like, all right, buying a quadplex is cute and everything, but like I gotta scale this thing up. I gotta go bigger. We're seeing a lot of syndications put funds together, and they're saying, hey, we have this capital, we gotta deploy it. It would take us now more work to buy several single family homes. Let's just buy a development. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of our developers that we were selling their spot lot properties now saying like, hey, we also are building out communities now. And so it's a perfect fit between what we're getting feedback from our investors, or we're getting that feedback from our developer partners to say, hey, we got to create now the marketplace to where the build for rent communities are being held, where both the developers can put their developments and at the same time the investors can find the developments. And now this is now the next frontier. We already have about 14 developments already underway, already on our inventory sheet. We're adding a lot more, and we're solving the problems of the people that are coming to us with, right? That's all we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's the important distinction is, if you've come here to watch this, maybe you've come through the build to rent network and you know us from the build to rent side of things, that level of streamlined service, that approach that's brought from build to rent really shifts into build for rent very nicely, just at a much larger scale, right?
Yeah, I would say 100%. And so, I mean, with that scale, we're talking about now moving beyond buying, 4 quadplex, and now we're going into, 108 units acquired all at once. So there is absolutely, it's simpler in the fact that you're buying a lot of units all at once. There's also now the team has to be packaged and put together a lot more robustly because now we're taking over a community, right? So now, and so it's fair to say when we're working with our developer partners, and we're usually working with them at the very beginning when it comes to even identifying great markets to be in, the types of properties that community is looking for, expected rents. We're going through that with them at the beginning stage. But ultimately, what we have to do is as the property is being developed, and some of these are raw land, some of these are land with permits already on them, some are already at some stage of development. And we're working with our investors who are now looking for particular things, and with our robust inventory, we're now to say, hey, this development at this stage would be the perfect time. So our investors can take over or purchase the development at various stages of development. So if you want to take it over and you want to buy the property and now hire the developer as a build for fee model, that's great. If you want to go ahead and put a deposit down and take over the property once the development is complete, we can do that as well. If you wanted to build a partnership and now, hey, when the property is stabilized with 70% occupancy, we can take over the property then. And we're also working with our lender partners. And our lender partners are now being able to be very creative as to how they solve for these challenges. So, for example, if a phase of development is completed, you're not going to be 70% rented right away.
Right.
So if our lender partners are what we're using them is saying, hey, what if, for the first 1 to 3 years, we just paid the interest on that development, which is going to be a much smaller number, which if you have a certain number of capital, you can write out a year or two of less than desirable vacancy rate.
Right.
But by year 3, now you're going to be past your 90% threshold, where now your income is going to obviously surpass your expenses, and now you're in the profit. So you're going to be probably in profit the entire way through, but your expenses are going to really kick in a few years out at that same period where your expected income is going to be at 100%.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm hearing and what we've talked about is, just increasing that optionality for investors. So if you want to come in and you want to buy one duplex, triplex, quadplex, great. If you want to buy multiple, we got you there too. But now guess what? If you want to buy all of the duplex, triplex, quadplexes in a community, we got you there too. And I think that's some of the secret sauce to the build to rent model, and now the build for rent model, is it's not just an exclusive list of properties. It's this whole ecosystem. It's this whole package that you work relentlessly to put together for these investors, so that they're not just reaching out to you to say, hey, I need access to your properties. Like you said, with the lenders, the relationship with the lenders, the access to the property managers, the advantageous terms that you're able to put together by working with that group as one in some of these deals. That's one of those key unique benefits that increases returns for investors that they can come to expect from build to rent, and now they can expect from build for rent.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times there's also a huge benefit for the developers themselves.
That's true.
Where if you're a developer, you're someone who probably likes to being on the ground, getting things done, yelling at contractors. You're in this state of like continuous action, and you're very focused at what you're doing. And the part that maybe, again, and most of our builders, our smallest builds less than 30, right? Our largest builds over 1,000 units a year. And so we actually work with some of the big national players as well that are, some of the 1, 2, and 3 largest developers in the country. Right. So, but they have a core competency. They have what they do best, which is, building, developing, acquisitions of land, that stuff. It's the marketing, it's the investor network, it's the packaging of the deal. That's the part that they're missing. So they can develop a great property, but they don't have that built-in investor network that they can now pitch it to. So it always seems like a one-off. And a lot of, your brokers and agents out there, they're not specialized in this field. They don't have a load of people reaching out looking for that specific type of property. It may be just part of their selling list. They might sell a gas station, and now they're trying to sell a built-to-rent community. Right? So versus for us, all of our developers are building specifically built-for-rent communities. All of our investors are coming in looking specifically for the built-to-rent, either properties or communities. So it's that marketplace of people who have that very specific focus. That's where they're going to, and that's even yourself. You're a district manager in this field. You're the vice president now of build for rent, and this is what you specialize in. Right. Someone wants to talk to you about rehabbing a property. You're going to say, hey, that's not my thing. That's not my jam. There's someone better to talk to about that. But this build for rent space, that's where I spent all my time focused on. I have the developer relationships. We know where the lands are located. We've ran the numbers already. And so when an investor comes in, we're getting straight to that point right away, which, our investors are busy, and it's funny, when I was an investor and I would speak with an agent, and they would ask me what I wanted to buy, and they'll turn to their computer and they'll go on the MLS. You're like, wait, what are you doing?
Right.
like, what are you doing? Why am I talking to you if you're just showing me the same thing I can find on my own? Yeah. So here at what we're doing is we're doing off-market deals that our investors can't find anywhere else, right? This is like, we are the source to find these types of opportunities, and that's what we excel at. And they don't want to spend a bunch of time like looking for things. Like day one of meeting with us, we can start now talking about these types of projects. We're going deep in the weeds right away. So it's a huge benefit just to save the time and have a very effective conversation with us.
Yeah, it's so exciting to see a fresh take on just the real estate investment space. I mean, you're not running a company full of salespeople. Like, you're running a company that puts these deals together, and then you have these district managers and these roles in place to advise and consult on our process. And then you empower that investor with the knowledge to be able to select from this inventory of exclusive properties that they're not going to see anywhere else. And so much of that goes back to, this amazing relationship you have with developers. And when I think of kind of the developer relationship side of the business, right now, at this stage, there's so much opportunity in all 50 states or 48 states right now, if you want to put those constraints on yourself. But, you get those questions all the time of, hey, when do you come into Arizona? When do you come into, South Carolina? When do you come into Georgia? And I love your answer to this because it's something that shows the discipline that's necessary as a CEO and a founder of a company, not to bite off more than you can chew, but to really focus on what you do and then do it great and then expand strategically. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you approach developer conversations, because inevitably you're going to have developers listening to this episode going, hey, I gotta talk to Alvin. I got a property up in Snohomish, Washington, up in horse country, and it's a big acreage and I want to develop it. I want to talk to Alvin. So kind of put that developer to CEO side of your hat on and I'd love to hear kind of how you approach that with developers and also help those developers as they're listening to this before they reach out to you.
Yeah. So we can help across the entire board, right? From the very beginning. So if someone's looking at, hey, like lot selection, right? Which areas, right? That we play that role there. And again, we're watching the trends, we're running the numbers on it, we're helping them isolate them. So a lot of times and there's different types of developers out there. So one of the big things is that when you're talking to like a new developer, someone who just has an idea, a certain pipeline, that's someone you're going to nurture for a while. That's going to be a long, educated process. I would say the majority of our developers are already like over that hump. They already own the land. They're already done a number of projects. And what they're looking for is they want confidence to be able to sell through their development project. That's probably the number one thing that we provide them. Yeah. Where, like if you think about like all this risk that a developer is taking on,
for sure, on
buying land that's not tax depreciate, you can't tax depreciate it, right? You have crews you're hiring, you're spending all this time, spending all this energy. And development is tough. It is difficult. It is probably the hardest aspect of everything that exists there, right? So, but there's some people ride bulls, some people develop properties, right? so it's that risk that must be a thrill for them. But they want to reduce their risk as much as possible. They're not nuts. They're looking at the payout, yes, but they're also looking, hey, I got to protect my downside. The biggest risk in a development project is that it doesn't get sold. That's the biggest thing. And so when we work with our developers, what we're saying is, hey, our goal is to sell that development as early along in the process as possible, right? Because again, if you had already a development that you started on and is already sold, and now all you have to do is complete this thing, you're like, hey, I can start planning the next development now. But again, whether it's a fourplex, a single family home, or a community, whatever it is, if you don't know you can sell your development, the thing you're focused on, you're going to hold off on everything else. You're going to now like take your foot off the gas because you're uncertain. But if it gets sold, or if someone's like saying, hey, I actually have like 7 people looking at this deal right now, you're like, oh, okay, there's activity taking place. But the scariest thing is spend all this time, all this effort, take on all this risk, and be at the stage where you have something completed. And now you have to put it out on the market. You got to see what you're going to get for it. Right. That's concerning, right? And if you think about the opportunity cost, that unknown forced you to not take action on other projects. And so the biggest thing we provide our developers is confidence. The confidence to sell through the inventory, to keep developing, to keep that ball rolling. And you have superintendents that are looking at you saying like, hey, like, is there another job after this one? You have contractors who are looking at you saying like, hey, like, is there more work after this, or is this going to be it? Do I have to go find another, developer to work with? And so that confidence to keep that ball rolling, keep developing, keep your crew in place, keep your guys, working hard for you. Like that's the biggest factor that we work with. So to answer your question, we can help along the entire stage. Whether you're brand new, we can get you going from that end. But most of our developers are already kind of like their foot's on that gas, and they just want to keep going to that next level.
Yeah, so we are that skilled matchmaker to an extent because we connect with such a broad range of investors and developers at different development stages that, it truly is like our job is to connect. Our job is to take our expertise and find the right match and make the right recommendations for that investor to take the right next steps to expand on their investment, if it's a build to rent model or the build for rent model. And then same for the developers, the developers out there that look at you as the trusted resource. I think that's a testament to your hard work and your expertise in the space, and ultimately why this build for rent podcast, we're on episode 1 right now, but really our goal here is to talk to people across the space of community development. So this isn't just going to be you and I checking in regularly. This is going to be connecting with the lenders in the space, other developers in the space, all of these experts in the area to kind of pull back the veil for our investors, but then also create that clear line of communication. If something is changing in the marketplace, I mean, you and I, here we are having this conversation in the middle of an election cycle, right? So, volatility galore, but, as we've talked about, you can always win with the right strategy. We're going to have this progressive conversation so that as macro forces change, as the economies of this space change, we're having that ongoing conversation to make sure we're keeping people updated on the right moves to make. Because the key is, no matter what's happening, there's always a right move to make. You don't want to make the wrong move. You don't want to say, I've done this for 20 years and I've done it this way, because that's a great way to show me a big loss over the last 20 years. But I do think that, the goal here is that you and I are going to kind of take this initial episode and build on it by talking to leaders in this industry.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 points, right? One is this actually came from talking to developers, lenders, property management groups, and feeling like, oh, we should have recorded this.
Yeah.
so,
right.
so that's kind of the formation of it. Is we have these conversations all the time. We just don't always record them. So some of the things are people that we've already spoke to, already know, already done business with. We're like, hey, let's have this conversation again, but let's record it this time. Let's make sure we can share this information, because we want to be the source people can go to get educated, to get more informed. The other part of it is that we want to keep learning. So Absolutely. I think a big part of it, successful people are naturally very curious. They want to learn more. There's like that initial layer that anyone can understand, but then there's that third layer. And so a lot of times when we're looking to talk to developers, we want to go to the rationale. We want to go that layer deeper. And so even for our investors, our developers, you're going to be presented with a lot of options in life and in your projects. And so the key is, when you make a decision, you just want to have a little bit more confidence behind it, and you want to understand why. So we're going to talk to a lot of different developers who are developing in different regions of the country, who have a different strategy in place. Some of them going really high luxury, some of them going more affordable workforce housing. Some are going to go, for larger bedrooms. Some are going to go smaller. Some are going to say, hey, let's add a garage. And so a lot of what we're going to do when we talk to them is figure out, like, hey, why did you decide not to include a garage? Like, what's the benefit of offering shared parking space as opposed to dedicated parking space? What's the rationale in offering this versus that? And go that layer deeper and hear the psychology in it. And as you kind of hear us explore their thought process, you yourself are going to have a chance to do your own self-reflection and feel like, hey, I like this strategy. I like that strategy. I like how this works. And we're going to be talking to some of the developers that you have a chance to buy from as well, which is the other part of it. So we're going to try to go deep into not only their thought process, but the actual development that they're working in. And you might say, hey, you know what? I know the perfect fund for that project. I know the perfect project for that. I know the perfect outcome for that. And so that's kind of our goal, is to build that resources, have those conversations, and go that level a little bit deeper.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot today about kind of where we're going, the progression of where we came from, who we're working with, what we look for. You as our founder, as the CEO, founder, chief executive leader of this organization, I would love to just kind of hear what are you looking at? Like, what's your vision over the next few years for Build for Rent? Because here we are today. We've got this inventory. We've got an initial inventory of 12 really interesting, compelling properties with different builders, and we're growing. This is the ground floor right now. So to be here at the ground floor, the future is exciting. But I'd love to kind of get your vision for Build for Rent over the next few years.
Yeah, so it's 2 parts. And so I can answer that in two different ways, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with the humble side, and then I'll
Lead with
go.
humble. Love it.
Well, so I always say this as I talk to myself a lot, and
Yeah.
there's certain things that I tell myself that you sound very self-centered if you say publicly. So I'm going to share you. I'm going to share publicly how I talk to myself, but I'll do that second. I'll
Yeah.
show
Yeah.
you the more humble side of it. So my origins was actually working with my father, doing a lot of rehabs, doing a lot of flips, and he's an immigrant. So everything he did, everything he accomplished was accomplished with his own bare hands, with his own strength, with his own
Hmm.
grit, all that grind. He
Right.
did it like that. So when all the family members were just renting out in New York, he bought a house. And he was looking to build upon that empire. And so he had a number of bakeries. He did a lot of incredible things that I witnessed him do. We also did a lot of rehabs together in Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
And he made the critical mistake of just, it was easy to acquire properties. He kept acquiring them. The problem was we weren't flipping them quick enough. So when 2008 came around and I was telling him that, like, hey, we got to stop buying, or we got to start hiring crews. We got to start hiring more people to get through these projects quicker. He got stuck with a lot of properties. And as a result, lost a lot of them, lost the bakeries. And it was a very challenging time for us. And again, this is me watching my idol kind of fall from grace. And quite frankly, my father never reached those heights again.
Yeah.
So I saw that firsthand. And so, like, if you ask me, like, what my why is, it's my why is to educate myself, educate others, so I can help people avoid that situation that happened to my father. So, and I have this yearning feeling in my body that my father didn't think that I knew what I was talking about. And so I have to now demonstrate him through my work that, yeah, I'm helping a lot of people out. I'm
Right.
helping them build their wealth, build their portfolio, to almost prove to my own father that, "Man, I know what I'm talking about."
Yeah.
Right. So you should listen. And so again, that's my own personal why. That's kind of what motivates me, is I want people to avoid that situation.
Yeah.
And so the other part of it, again, that's my humility side. That's, I want to help investors. I want to help developers. I'm driven in that capacity. The other part of it is I'm extremely competitive.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't go against the value oriented, but it means that I don't like thinking of things as far as limits or capabilities. It's reaching as far as you can, and then if you got to scale it back a little bit, make it as temporary as possible, and then reach again. And so when I was doing Cape Coral Investor Network, there was a time period where I had to figure out clearly what I'm doing doesn't align to where the company's actually doing, focus on new construction properties. And then I read the book 10X by Grant Cardone,
Right.
which is a very influential book to me. And I don't care how you feel about him as a person, that book is phenomenal.
It's impactful.
And it forces you to think beyond what's right in front of you. And so he was talking a lot about, when you're creating a business, don't think of it as what's your competitive advantage, what slice of the pie can I take, what do they do good, what do I do good, like, where are the weaknesses. Don't think about that way. Think as far as like market domination. And a lot of that has to do with, hey, how do you convey your message as quickly as possible? How do you offer the most amount of value to your consumers? And at the stage, it was like, well, the only, like, if I thought of some like Tavares Group Real Estate or whatever, it's like, well, that seems like I'm just going for a slice.
Right.
But if I call myself essentially the category name, which is, this is the build to rent category, build to rent. Let's go after the whole pie. Let's go after the entire industry. This is, for me, a blue ocean strategy where there's no limits to how we can go. There's absolutely no reason why we can't be 50 states. We're already expanding beyond Florida at this point now. There's no reason why we can't be international brand. There's no reason why we can't be that marketplace for build to rent, build for rent communities and properties. And so that's the long-term vision. There is a lot of thoughtfulness. So again, because of that first argument, I take helping people very seriously, and I make sure that we provide value the entire way. And I also want to make sure that we're packaging things in a way that it's clearly a far superior product than what anyone else could put out there. So those are the mandates that I put on myself, and that's kind of like the weight that I put on my shoulders. But that's kind of like, if you think about like what's my driving force, is all of those factors. I don't like being second place. I don't want to think small. I don't want to be have a lower output than what I'm capable of putting out there. So my goal personally is to maximize my potential, and that's what we're going after with this endeavor. And again, that's on a personal note. I also have a team that I have to feed that I'm very proud to pay out. I'm always proud to hear success stories from our investors, and it's that collective vision that I think is what is going to take us to that next level.
Yeah, when you and I first met, like when we had our first conversation, my background is 20 plus years corporate executive focused on M&A, right? So just in that kind of world, I've spoken to hundreds of CEOs over the years, not only in real estate, but across service and hospitality and tech and just kind of the full gamut. I've been very fortunate to have that background that led me here. But I will tell you, in those 20 plus years of conversing with CEOs, and then later in my career, doing a bit of coaching to early stage CEOs with startups, I will say that differentiating factor that you just conveyed is that recipe for success and why you and I are here today. It is that understanding that ultimately you are a humble servant leader here to support your people and support solving the problem. But there's also the dotted line to ... end world domination, right? And I think that's that secret sauce, again, to get back to that, of like, it is about helping people, but the amount you can help people doesn't have a ceiling, and you understand that, and that's how you're approaching solving this problem. And like I said, that's why you and I are here today, paired up like we are, because you and I had that blue ocean conversation, and I bought in almost immediately. So I'm ecstatic to be here. I know we're excited to move this forward. We've got a strong foundation that's going to be, further pushed out over the coming weeks with our introduction of the inventory and even more announcements about Build for Rent. And then the future of these larger conversations with other partners, expansion into new markets, sky's the limit here. And, it's been a great ride thus far. And to think we're just getting started is even more exciting to think about.
Yeah, and I think kind of going back to the beginning, a lot of it has to do with just listening. Mm-hmm. Like if people are making it obvious what they're looking to accomplish, and so it's almost like if we can simplify the process, make it as transparent, so we don't hold back with data, we don't hold back with information, we're not going to drag conversations along unnecessarily. We're going to get to that point as quickly as possible, and a lot of that comes from what our investors want. They want to have a very effective 30-minute conversation. Yeah. Right? They don't want to spend the whole time driving around doing all this work. They want to see performance right away. Like, give them photos, give them the video tour, put all that information in front of them right away. And this is what clients want. If you look at just the trends that are happening nationwide, we're saying, well, there's a big movement towards the Sun Belt. Right. This is the southern part of the United States. Right. And a lot of times what they're looking for more space. They're looking for less dense housing. And so that's a huge emerging trend. They also want newer properties. People pay a premium to be the first person to live in a home. Right. The designs of homes are dramatically different. We're not dealing with like 8-foot ceilings anymore. Right. Those days are over. Right. Also, maintenance costs are a lot less. And these are things that tenants are looking for. Like, people are doing searches to rent out build to rent communities. They like the idea that they can be in a home that's market rent and they have a garage. They can park the car up front. Some of these communities have like community pools attached to them. They have places to relieve the dogs. They have car wash stations. These types of things or amenities are what they would want. And this is what they're looking for. So also now we're seeing that this was never the case before, that you're seeing a lot of large institutionals put money behind these projects. Right. So a lot of what we do is trying to give, like, these are big trends that are taking place. There's a lot of big dollars going into these developments. And what we're saying is, hey, let's broaden who the potential buyer is for these types of developments, as opposed for it just being the top one or two of the S&P 500 acquiring these properties. Let's broaden it to those smaller, mid-sized family offices, to some of those syndications that are just starting out. Now we're gonna expand the visibility of the developments that are currently taking place throughout the country, and give smaller investors a chance to play a role in that. And so we're trying to what's the best term? Democratize.
Democratize. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and just being a lot more transparent. And that way, there's not a veil that, or some secret backroom situation where that's like, we're putting things in front. And a lot of it is part of this podcast is putting more available out there. If you do searches for these things, nothing really available. So we're putting more information up front. We want to welcome in more of the population to get involved in these deals. And I'm a huge fan of real estate. I became financially free because of real estate. Real estate is such a powerful tool and widely underutilized. And so part of what we're saying is, same thing I'll tell my uncle, I'll tell my father, I'll tell my brother, is like, hey, we got to think about how to maximize the benefit of real estate, because the wealth created here is, I think, far better than any other alternative. The challenge for them is always all the uncertainty and the how. And that's what we're trying to address. That's what we're trying to make simpler.
Yeah, it's you mentioned it there. It's for so many investors, you have to keep in mind that success leaves clues, but you have to be looking for those clues, right? And that's an important aspect of it is, you have to, employ the right people to help you find those clues. And I think that's what Build to Rent is saying. Like, we are listeners. We listen to the market. We listen to our investors. We listen to developers, and we solve those problems. And those problems are solved by coming together and working in more of that kind of centralized packaging approach. And it positions everyone in a way that they are having their problems addressed. And that is that key differentiator. That's that piece to success that kind of brings people together on the real estate front. Because, I mean, if you know anything about real estate, right now there's a lot of empty office space and office space about to be defaulting right now. It is what it is. That piece of the investment front, you have individuals looking to exit out of that category of investment. And, even as we talk here about Build for Rent, we're creating that optionality as an option here to shift out and shift in. So, it's again, just a lot of listening and a lot of problem solving on our part, to the point where by the time an investor reaches out to you, to myself, to any of our district managers, you've already built these deals 95% complete, because that's what people don't realize. Like, you and I are going to get off this recording, and you've probably got 5 more calls, checking in with developers, talking to developers, building that relationship, and working to solve those problems to put a better deal together for the investors. So that by the time you and I are on the phone with an investor who wants to see the pro forma because that's what they want, you've negotiated these terms. Like, these terms are there advantageously positioning for that investor, where the investor is not like, all right, I'm going to have to go into this with this district manager or this individual. We're going to have to negotiate every step of the way. Every single term needs to be negotiated to get a better deal, because you've already done 95% of that work, right?
Yeah, and that's when we think about how do we grow, how do we expand, is by providing an insane amount of value up front.
Right.
So you want to see the property? Great. We have video tour of it already. Yeah. We already have photographs of it. We have the property management team, the lender. It's all picked out. And then we because we're doing so volume oriented, we've negotiated better pricing. Hey, yep. We've negotiated better terms. Hey, we negotiated, some of our Build to Rent stuff is free property management. We've negotiated the rate buy downs. Hey, you're uncertain about, whether it's going to rent or not. Hey, we negotiated a 3-month rental rate guarantee. So a lot of these things is, a lot of our clients, if they want to be difficult, great. We welcome you anyway. What ends up happening is they kind of hear what we do and they're like, oh, that's too easy. let me go ahead and there must be another path that if I apply a little bit more work, I can get a better deal. And they'll go search the universe, they'll go
Yes,
do
they
all this
will.
stuff. And you see that they'll come back 3 or 4 months later and say, yeah, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah, I missed 3 months. I lost 3 months of opportunity, but I'm ready now, right?
And that's a lot of what we're fixated on is, our goal is we want to help our investors build their portfolio, but as quickly and as streamlined as possible. We want to reduce the brain damage that it takes to become a real estate investor. And, it should feel good, right? You should feel
Yes,
excited.
it
You
should.
should feel happy. It's like the whole point, the whole promise of real estate investing. And again, it's not 100% passive, but is that you shouldn't have to think about it the entire way. It shouldn't be
Right.
something that it shouldn't be a second job. It should be something that like, hey, I understand that the best asset class to put my money in is real estate. Let me just spend time, figure out the best opportunity, deploy my capital, and then that's it. Let it go to work.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to solve for is for that opportunity.
And that scales all the way up to the build for rent model, right? And that's the beauty of it. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
why this is the natural progression.
So at the build for rent model, and this is kind of some of the huge advantages, is overall per unit, your operational expenses are going to be so much less because you're going to have more control over what they are. So again, when you get to 105 units, you're not going to, now have to call a different plumber every single time. You're going to have that dedicated plumber for you already proactively working on these properties. So same with the property management team. This person isn't charging you per each property. It's like now you get your dedicated team just working on that on that property. So
Right.
a lot of your costs now get spread across multiple different units, and you have a lot more control over how that gets expensed. So there's a cap on a lot of those expenses. The other thing is that like when you think about just like vacancy,
Yeah.
if you have a single family home and that tenant moves out for that time period, hopefully you can get someone out there quickly. That's
Zero.
your occupancy rate is zero,
Yep.
right? That means for that 2 or 3 weeks it takes to get someone else in there, you have zero income coming in. If you have 100 units, you're expecting a tenant to move out all the time.
Correct.
And, one tenant moving out brings you from let's say if it was at 95% occupancy, 94%,
Yep.
right? But you're making profit, once you pass that 60 or 70 occupancy rate. So everything else is just gravy. Everything else is on top of that. Not only that, but when you think about the exit strategy, a lot of our investors are looking to take down one of these developments, again, depending on stage of it. And then because they're individual lot properties, most of the times, is now you can sell it to a homeowner who will pay a premium on that property.
Yeah.
So when you buy it as an investor, you're basically looking at the returns. And so the property has to be priced in a way that makes a return favorable. But when you're selling it to an end user or a homeowner who's going to live in the property and enjoy it themselves, now they're investing more as a emotional buy.
Correct.
And that's going to, as an individual property, is going to be comped and compared to other individual properties will automatically be a lot higher. So a lot of the institutional funds who are in the space saying, hey, I'm going to do a 10-year hold and I'm going to exit. But that exit is going to be monumental compared
Right.
to the cost that it took to enter. Because again, you're buying a commercial deal that's going to obviously need to have a capped price to make the numbers work. But then when you exit, it's going to be a homeowner that's
It is.
emotionally attached to the property. So you're going to sell it for a lot more. So the exit is better than what you can do with any other property as well.
Yeah. And that's that sweet advantage of the build for rent model is it's build to rent multiplied, right? I mean, that's what it is. It is the economies of scale, the ability to grow, the ability to protect yourself, the downside risk through size, and just that optionality of, if you're taking down 40 quadplex units, just all the different avenues you can go down as that owner in the future, at 3 years, at 5 years, all the way up to 10, 15 years with all of this new construction. Because that's the beauty of it is, like we talk about with build to rent, that power of reduced, repair and maintenance and those unexpected costs in a single investment property that's new construction. Well, now you've just compounded that on the build for rent model, because now you have 40 brand new units all under warranty with new equipment in the space and low repair costs that, once you get that usable life out of that and you're going to shift it into an emotional sale, you've just positioned this to maximize and win at all the different levels that you win at in real estate investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only that, but you add on the tax benefits, you add on all the other, the debt depreciation. It's so many benefits. And Tim, one of the things that I'm most excited about is that you have come on board as the vice president of our Build for Rent division. And so you're going to be that linchpin that kind of brings in a lot of our new developers, works with our investors. And so I kind of want to get your feedback, and it kind of, I know we're talking about me today, but I do want to just share
You're the star of this show.
But I do want to just state just how proud I am, how happy I am to have someone of your caliber on this team. And this is this is something that the market's craving for. This is something that currently is very difficult, and you're going to play a very central role in simplifying that process for a lot of folks.
Yeah, and I've been very fortunate throughout my career to work with companies that were focused on growth and scale through both organic unit count growth, but then also mergers and acquisitions. So I've had this amazing experience in my career, and to be here now with the Build for Rent model, doing the exact same thing, right? We're growing and scaling build to rent into something, 10x greater today than it was yesterday as a goal. That's my expertise. That's what I love doing. But B, you can't just do that with anyone. You can't just do that with any team. The team here at Build to Rent is a very special one. I acknowledge that. I've realized that here very early, and that's the key to our success, is working with our team and understanding that we are a team of problem solvers, and we work diligently with our developers. We work unrelentlessly and focused on helping our investors, and then be able to converge that together into these synergies of value for all parties. I think that's such an important piece, and that's going to be my focus here moving forward as we seek to scale this at a very fast, a tried and true pace, right? That very solidified approach to success as quickly as possible. We're gonna, any great entrepreneur knows you jump off the cliff and build the plane on the way down. We're going to do that, but we've built planes before. So that's our strategic advantage, is we're jumping off that cliff. Yeah.
And so, again, it's one of those things where developers are looking to sell these development projects. We already have the investors coming in. So we're going to open the floodgates to allow more to come in. I would definitely, say, hey, we're going to have a lot more videos showing the developments we're working on. Always visit the website. You can go to buildforrent.com to get more insights as to the development projects we're working on, where they're located. And I would absolutely recommend scheduling a consultation, even if you're at the early stage, even if something that you're just kind of considering, just thinking about. But absolutely, if you're at that deep end, you're ready to pull a trigger, you have that capital you need to deploy. But at any stage, we are relationship oriented. And so we're looking to figure out, like, hey, how do we collaborate together? Even if what you're thinking of doing is a little bit out of the box, by all means, reach out to us. We're more than happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, the hardest thing for so many early stage or just starting out investors is doing just that, starting. And I think Build to Rent, as our approach takes on more of a consultative approach to this process, absolutely reach out. If you don't feel like you're quite ready yet, if you feel like you need some, a little consultation around your strategy or fine tuning your strategy, and you're like, well, I don't want to reach out to Build for Rent because they're very busy. Yeah, we're very busy, but we're very busy helping investors like you just as much as we're helping investors with 1 to 3 units that are looking to scale, and now looking at these investors who are looking to take down entire communities. Our commitment is service. Our commitment is helping you be a successful investor, regardless of your stage. So reach out, schedule a consultation, and we're going to be happy to help. And while we do that, we're also going to be creating more content on the Build to Rent network and this new Build for Rent series to continue to provide different options for you our followers, our listeners, our viewers on how to most effectively approach real estate investment and reap all of the amazing benefits that this industry has to offer. But Alvin, I want to thank you for your time. It's as always, we can probably talk for hours on end, but we should probably cut this off for our listeners and get ready for the next episode. And I know you've got a couple developer calls, so we're going to break it off here. But as always, everyone, thank you for your time. Thanks for listening. Subscribe for the latest episodes, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.
Tim, thank you, Tim. Cool. Got it done.
Cool.